English translation 865th contact. Saturday, 30th of September 2023. 104 Yochoyars.
Greetings, Edward, my dear friend.
Nice to see you again. You have not been here for days. But be welcome, and also greetings, Quetzal, my friend.
That is so, because I have been busy all these days orienting myself regarding the persons who have been here from Mexico to do their extensive work regarding the interviews, as well as what has been happening elsewhere all around. Also, I have been busy getting to know a little bit about planet Earth and its structures, which I am going to ask you a few things about then, and hope you can educate me a little bit.
Yes, there was a lot going on. There was also quite obviously spying going on, and in quite a primitive way and so conspicuous that it could not remain hidden.
I also noticed that, and I think the whole thing is really ridiculous. As I have already been informed by Simya Se in this regard, this ridiculousness was already practiced when you and those close to you inhabited the center some 45 years ago. Even then, you were spied upon and harassed, as well as harmed, because you were not only foreigners here, but you also openly acknowledged that you were in contact with us. Therefore, you in particular were hostile and also monitored from various quarters.
Yes, it was like that. On the one hand, there were the foreign fools here, as we say, which is why some persons from the surrounding area did us harm, while others were well disposed towards us, like those who saw your beam ships, like certain people in Schmidruti, but who kept silent towards the local residents, because they were afraid that they would be declared crazy and even put into a mental institution, like, for example, from Schmidruti. From Schmidruti, who saw 3 of your beam ships hovering over our house, as also Erwin Murner from Winterthur. This was also the case when Ernst Keller from Schalchen and others were here at the center at that time for a lecture, and you still let yourselves be seen on certain occasions. Also, from Schmidruti, saw Simya Se's beam ship on several occasions, and also from Schmidruti, saw Simya Se when she came to Surwees with her beam ship and picked me up. At that time, it was just that you did not shield yourselves as you suddenly did when the spying became more and more intense. The joke is that after 45 years or so, people are still frequently circling our center and unsettling the area, like people being roped off into the trees in the forest all around. And the fact that 2 weeks ago spies were pushed for hours on the square in front of the Freihof in Schmidruti, when the Mexico team was here in the Center for Film and Sound Recordings, that was more than just ridiculous. This fact is of course again vehemently denied, although film footage was taken in this regard, just like the repeated incidents when visitors from America photographed everything as they were being maneuvered around and men were being roped down into the trees. This is probably denied as well as when Simya Se's beamship was chased around for a good 10 minutes in my winkle, which has been denied throughout, although there is a photograph of it which proves everything and has been widely circulated and is therefore known worldwide.
Everything in this regard is really ridiculous, as you say. It is worth mentioning, and we have talked about this many times, which you have then also retrieved and written down several times, as well as disseminated as reports of conversations, that our presence cannot be located or otherwise established. Consequently, this is also known to the spies, who, as we discovered a long time ago, are interested in recording and reading your reports. Therefore, it is well known to them that their really very primitive technology is completely useless to be able to somehow locate or otherwise detect our presence. Furthermore, I want to explicitly mention this in particular, we have no interest whatsoever in interfering in any matters of terrestrial concern.
I know that also that the times are definitely over when you, that is to say, Svath, Asket, Simya Se, Plagia and Ptah still let yourselves be seen here and there. But at the end of the 70s and in the 80s, unfortunately, so many unpleasant things happened, also with the idiotic and ridiculous spying, that you disconnected everything.
Unfortunately, yes, you can say that, but it was necessary because for us it became.
I know that. You do not have to say it specially. Besides, when I start to expose political facts, it does not mean that I am politicizing, but just stating what really is. But that has nothing to do with playing politics, because what is really being said is what is factual and what is being revealed. But before I come to that, I want to say this. You have nothing to do with the foreigners and their UFOs. Consequently, nothing is to be expected from you regarding interference in earthly affairs or any concerns, nor that you would in any wise endanger security or bring danger. This is the opposite of the Earthlings themselves, because the war in the Ukraine, which Russia started because the Americans pushed everything so far that it went bang, because they want to make a pig out of Russia and take it, proves enough. And how lowly intelligent and simple-minded many rulers and parts of the populations of about 50 countries are, who supply weapons and money etc. to the fanatical warmonger Zelensky, proves on the other hand that the Earthlings themselves are the great danger, and that it does not come from you. All this proves that the Earthlings, in their greed for power, stupidity, as well as in their discord and above all in their inability to develop themselves into true human beings, are waging wars and enmities, and are still biased in this respect. There has been enough proof of this for thousands of years, for war has been going on Earth in this wise since time immemorial. And that it is the same with the war in Ukraine, that is undoubtedly, and that it is not recognized by the stupid ones as well as the governments involved in it, and also the howling parts of the population that Zelensky, who is begging for weapons, etc., all over the world, is just as much a Nazi as Hitler was, only that Zelensky acts in a perfidious, underhanded, greasy, and otherwise, that the stupid ones of his supporters do not see and recognize, however. As elsewhere, they also do not see that Zelensky has his own plans for world domination, which he strives for much more perfidiously than hegemonic America does. This is despite the fact that he is a puppet of America and will be dropped or murdered when he is no longer needed and has done his duty, but before that he will be abused as a Jew by America, without noticing it in his lowly intelligent and simple-mindedness, and ultimately spreading Jew hatred worldwide once again. But he can still win over many lowly intelligent and simple-minded people around the world who are believers in his art of persuasion. It will.
Excuse me, but it is to be said that it is not recognized that, as Bermunda and I have noted, Zelensky is running a Nazi-style Nazi regency in Kiev, with those indoctrinated by Zelensky being of the same mind as him and thus having Nazi-like views. Furthermore, we have also clearly established that like-minded Nazi elements of the Ukrainian leaders have connections with various leaders and parts of the population of the arms-supplying states, and I would like to mention in particular those in Germany. This is a fact which is not recognized due to the lack of recognition of the partisan responsible state leaders, and that part of the population which is unthinking and falsely well-meaning towards America and Zelensky. All of them, due to their all-embracing and thinking limitations, can also not see and recognize what Zelensky actually wants, namely that he is striving for the domination of Earth, which he wants to achieve with the help of America working in the background, whose state leaders and parts of the population are also so ignorant that they do not recognize this. All the others, however, who are righteous and not biased but honest thinkers and doers, and thus not of the same mind as the Nazi thinkers, find no means whatsoever to counteract the evil. Something that has already happened in likewise. When Chancellor Merkel in Germany proclaimed the so-called Willkommenskultur, welcome culture, according to which the worldwide wave of refugees from the so-called underdeveloped states to the rich northern states has begun. However, as a result of her stupidity, this woman will continue to propagate her insane welcome culture, and will continue to push the refugee system and the migration of peoples, as you yourself know very well and have experienced together with Sfath. But these waves of refugees cause many deaths, as well as the introduction of diseases that are common in foreign states, so that they can also spread in the rich northern states. The fact that this will result in mass migrations, as you called it years ago in the Wise, that 250 to 350 million refugees from poor and underdeveloped states will invade the rich states of the North, is based on the unreasonableness and stupidity of today's state leaders. They are making wrong and completely ineffective decisions in their incompetent, situation incompetent and governance incompetent thinking, and are trying to implement them through wrong actions, so that they are not successful, and the rich northern states are flooded with refugees from poor and underdeveloped states. And this was triggered years ago by a person who was absolutely incapable of running a state, namely Chancellor Merkel, who was in every respect as incapable of running a state correctly as, according to our observations and findings of today, around 96.3% of the Earth's leaders are absolutely and therefore completely incapable of their office. But this has been the case since time immemorial, which is why only greed for power, hostility, greed for wealth, hatred, revenge and retaliation, as well as war and terror, etc., have steadily been in the foreground, which has remained so until today, and for the time being, there is no hope whatsoever that this will change for the better.
Oops, all this raises something new to think about. But the rulers of Germany and 50 other countries are probably incapable of doing so, as they were from the very beginning when the war was started, which would have ended after only about 14 days if it had not been for the idiots who supplied weapons, etc. from the start, and continue to do so. The war, however, has been raging for a long time now, and on both of the warring sides it is constantly claiming many dead, which the arms suppliers and Zelensky supporters and Russia haters do not care about at all, because they are far away from the gun that they, for the time being, are not hit by a bullet. However, all those who are really the idiots of the world cannot understand that the war is continuing, for which actually only America with its NATO murder organization is to blame, as well as those who supply the weapons, etc. to Ukraine, that is to say to Zelensky, as well as the other Zelensky supporters. They also do not know that foreign military forces have been secretly fighting in Ukraine against the Russians for a long time, but this will become official in the near future, just as Switzerland will interfere again, namely by wanting to spend money on mine-clearing operations in Ukraine, which means a new breach of neutrality is imminent. But if Bern continues to act politically in this wise and in other wrong ways, it is already absolutely certain that the country will not grow as old as it has since 1291. At that time, when the Bundesbrief was created, which emerged at the beginning of August 1291 as Switzerland's oldest constitutional document, in which the inner Swiss valley communities of Uri, Schwyz and Nidwalden assured each other of mutual assistance against all those who wanted to do them violence or injustice. It was still correct and also steadfast Swiss who joined together as a security alliance for the country. This is in contrast to the fact that it is quite obvious that certain elements of the Swiss government are now only absolutely incapable of government and as such are useless in any way. Effectively, they advocate their hostility towards Switzerland in order to sell out the country to foreign powers. First and foremost to the EU dictatorship and the murderous organization NATO, which actually and truly embodies America's army of murderers, with which the American desires for hegemony are satisfied. Effectively, it is a fact today that the Swiss, woman as well as man, have to be ashamed to still have Swiss citizenship, because what is being politically self-importantly pursued by certain rulers in Bern has in no wise anything to do with freedom and peace, but more and more with slavery and coercion, as in Vogt's time. This is in addition to the fact that treacherous members of the government are flirting with foreign powers with regard to a merger, whereby the uninformed population is then persuaded to vote in favor of the traitorous party, or other party in the referendum by means of false information. This, however, has nothing to do with Swiss freedom, but corresponds to a mean and rotten indoctrination aimed at the Swiss people, who, trimmed with bias, then believe the false information and accordingly unthinkingly agree to what is being propagated. However, it should be clear that the vote is not cast according to the will of the people, but according to the indoctrinating influence of the party that corresponds to the whole. But this is not recognized by the people due to their ignorance. However, those lowly intelligent and simple-minded elements of the government who are traitors to neutrality take advantage of this in their greed for power, as a result of which they can work treacherously throughout the country, and, so to speak, pour petrol into the blazing fire. But in this way, those fallible and unfit rulers, who have nothing but a big mouth, bask in their posts and undeservedly collect horrendous salaries, and who also allow themselves to be idolized by the stupid and shamefully like-minded of the people, manage to ensure that many of the people also lose all sense of good and correct responsibility for Switzerland, as well as all logic, understanding, and reason, to such an extent that the future of free Switzerland is called into question. This is absolutely certain if Bern continues to muddle along in this wrong way and all the good things about Switzerland are demonized and betrayed. This is also due to the fact that they continue to flirt with America and the EU dictatorship, as well as the fact that there are not the correct and responsible persons in the government who know how things should really go politically according to the right. What is happening here in Switzerland again due to inept government officials is shown by the following article, which states that Switzerland's neutrality is already being made a pig of again from the highest echelons of the government, the Federal Council.
This is how the Swiss defense minister tramples on Swiss neutrality. By Christian Müller, 24 September 2023.
Switzerland's neutrality is centuries old and has spared Switzerland from several wars. And because Swiss neutrality has also been recognized and appreciated internationally, Switzerland has often also been able to contribute to peace as a welcome mediator in international conflicts. The Swiss Defense Minister Viola Amherd, however, simply does not give a damn. She propagates and promotes close cooperation with NATO, without asking the people's opinion. Viola Amherd, a member of the 7-member Swiss government since 2019, heads the Department of DDPS, Defense, Civil Protection and Sport.
An honest politician?
One may doubt. The federal decision of the two chambers of the Swiss Parliament on 20th December 2019 to approve a budget of 6 billion Swiss francs for the purchase of new fighter jets for the Swiss Armed Forces was successfully challenged in a referendum, which led to the referendum that then became necessary. Which fighter jets were to be purchased was, it was said, still being evaluated. Under discussion were the F/A-18EF Super Hornet from Boeing in the USA, the F-35A from Lockheed Martin in the USA, the Rafale B from Dassault in France, the Eurofighter from Airbus, BAE Systems and Leonardo. Produced in Germany, Great Britain, Spain and Italy, and finally the Gripen E from Saab in Sweden. The result of the referendum was one of the narrowest in Swiss history. 50.1%, or 1,605,700 votes, said yes to the purchase of new fighter jets. 49.9%, or 1,597,030 votes, said no. The difference was 86 to 70 votes out of more than 3.2 million voters. But, according to the Swiss government at the time, a vote is a vote. Only after the vote did the DDPS announce that the evaluation had been completed and that the winner of the evaluation was the F-35, the fighter jet that, unlike others, is also capable of transporting nuclear bombs, which is why it is also preferred by Germany. This, in turn, prompted the opponents of fighter jets to become active again, especially since the vote also took place on the very day of the start of the war in Armenia, on 27 September 2020, a war that showed in a very short time that nowadays it is not fighter jets that decide a war, but the quality and number of drones. Moreover, it was revealed that the evaluation decision in favor of the F-35 had already been made internally before the vote, but was deliberately not made public so as not to motivate those doubters who might still accept fighter jets from Europe, but would reject the purchase of a US jet to vote against. It is important to know, however, that the manufacturer of a fighter jet can, due to the built-in systems, remotely render any jet inoperative, that is to say, put it out of service within minutes at the push of a button. And what was the pious Viola doing at the cooker? In order to stifle these discussions, she signed the purchase contract with the USA and Lockheed Martin in a hurry, arguing that otherwise the price would go up. That took the issue off the table. Democracy à la Viola Amherd from the canton of Valais. And what has been learned from this story in Bern, the Swiss capital? Nothing. Now, on 21st September 2023, the DDPS ministry put the following announcement on the official website of the Swiss executive. Literally,
Partnership for Peace. The objectives of cooperation between Switzerland and NATO for 2023 and 2024 have been set.
Bern 21.9. 2023. Switzerland and NATO have defined the objectives of their cooperation for the years 2023 and 2024 in a non-legally binding document, the Individually Tailored Partnership Program, ITPP. The conclusion of this ITPP takes place within the framework of the Partnership for Peace, PFP, and contributes to the implementation of the Federal Council's intention to strengthen international cooperation in the area of security policy. Switzerland has participated in the Partnership for Peace, PFP, since 1996. The PFP is a program for bilateral cooperation between NATO and individual partner states. It enables partner states, such as Switzerland, to pursue tailored cooperation with NATO in the area of security and defense policy. For Switzerland, the PFP is an instrument thanks to which it can cooperate with the states in its regional environment according to its needs and interests and contribute to stability and security in its surroundings. Participation in the PFP is compatible with Switzerland's neutrality.
Cooperation between Switzerland and NATO in 2023 and 2024.
All cooperation between Switzerland and NATO takes place within the framework of the PFP. The Federal Council defines the thematic focal points and priorities of this cooperation for the last time in March 2022. On this basis, Switzerland and NATO then draw up a non-legally binding document for 2 years entitled the Individually Tailored Partnership Program, ITPP. The ITPP for the period from 2023 to 2024 was recently completed. It outlines the objectives of the cooperation. It sets out general objectives, such as the continuation of political dialogue, as well as more specific objectives, such as the development of cooperation in the areas of new technologies and innovation, resilience, women, peace and security, WPS, disarmament, non-proliferation, and cyber defense. Several goals concern the strengthening of interoperability, for example in the Air Force or communication systems. It is also planned to increase Switzerland's participation in NATO's Centres of Excellence and to second staff officers to NATO structures. With its military attack on Ukraine, Russia has destroyed the foundations for a rule-based peace order in Europe. Against this background, the ITPP contributes to the implementation of the Federal Council's intention to strengthen international cooperation in the field of security policy while maintaining neutrality SIC, as stated in the supplementary report to the Security Policy Report 2021, which was adopted by the Federal Council on 7 September 2022. End of the official message from the DDPS. And all this goes under the name Partnership for Peace. Where and when has NATO already done something for peace? Neutral Switzerland is striving for interoperability with NATO. The word interoperability, known internationally as interoperability, means nothing more than that an army can and should work closely with NATO, or, to give a concrete example, exactly what NATO has been doing successfully with the Ukrainian army for years. Same caliber of ammunition, same cadre levels in the officer corps, at least one common language in Ukraine, for example, English, same communication systems, joint military maneuvers, etc., etc. In the French language document on this DDPS decision, the word interoperabilité appears 10 times. And what does this have to do with our Swiss neutrality? Nothing at all. It is a living break with the historically grown neutrality. In other words, let us Swiss also pursue politics according to the guidelines of the USA. Horrible dictu. It is simply horrible. But what can we do against this anti-democratic and anti-neutrality policy of our defense minister? One thing above all, sign the current collection of signatures for the Neutrality Initiative. Here you can find the signature forms. A quicker way would be to vote this lady out of office in the Federal Council elections on 13th December. But unfortunately, there is no hope for that, especially since the party that brought her into the Federal Council, the so-called Die Mitte, formerly the CVP, the Christian Democratic People's Party, may even become the third strongest party in Switzerland in the parliamentary elections on 22nd October, with perhaps even 2 instead of only 1 member in the 7-member Federal Council in future. P.S. By the way, where are the city and canton of Geneva, which will lose their international reputation as an ideal, because neutral, negotiating venue in the shortest possible time? The ICRC is already in the process of cutting hundreds of jobs in Geneva.
All this means, as I know the future, that at last thoughts must be nurtured in correct and valuable ways, such as that human beings come to the helm of government who won. In their actions and in their thoughts are not partisan, and throughout truly represent Switzerland in complete neutrality. 2. Must not, and never must, flirt with an alliance in any wise with foreign powers, or even enter into any treaties which would in any way violate our Swiss neutrality. 3. Rulers must never have the right to take and implement any decisions without the neutral consent of the people. Because in Switzerland, as a completely neutral democracy, only in accordance with the will of the people may anything be determined and implemented, which also concerns the appointment of government officials, so without exception by the National Council, the Council of States, and the Federal Council. If this is handled differently, then it corresponds to a dictatorial act, as when elsewhere the electorate of the population is influenced before a vote by propaganda, with tracts and advertising material, and thereby a vote is influenced in favor of a party or government office. Now, if from now on the government does not act in a truly neutral and politically correct and impartial manner, as well as if persons who do not have absolute integrity lead Switzerland into the future, then it cannot be avoided that the day will come with absolute certainty when the Matthaei am letzten will be exceeded for Switzerland. There is still some time until then, but it is becoming more and more urgent to do the right thing, because suddenly the inevitable will happen if we continue to muddle along, and then it will no longer be possible to change anything for the better. And this is not a prophecy, but a prediction that will inevitably come true if the people of Switzerland continue to tolerate what is being done high-handedly and wrongly by the government in Bern. This also applies to the war in Ukraine, which, however, this does not mean that Russia's actions in launching and waging the war are any better, because such actions are also as reprehensible, criminal, and unacceptable as they are a danger to all humanity, as are the NATO criminal murdering organization and America. And that through idiotic supporters, this clique of murderers, the world public does not know, just as it does not know that they are completely. However, nothing may be said openly about this yet, but it is to be said that, of course, to a lesser extent, all countries that have military armies belong to this, especially those that station their military in foreign countries, in order to provide for alleged order there in a military presence, but in reality, exercise their military might, which should actually be recognized and understood by the lowest of all lowly intelligent people. As for the foreigners with their UFOs, that is another matter, but I do not want to say anything about it, for it is none of my business, just as you also remain neutral in every way and distance yourselves completely from them and do not want to have anything to do with them, just as you do with the earthly military and security forces. And you do this in such a way that even the foreigners with their futuristic technology and their other possibilities could not locate you, because the sonar technology is much more highly developed than that of the peoples who whiz around in earthly airspace with their UFOs.
That is what I was also going to say earlier, although in slightly different words, but what you are is exactly what corresponds to the truth. And that you are saying what will come to pass.
I know that, and I also said that. It is also to be said concerning you Pleiaren that you are not here to make yourselves haters on earth, but only because I am fulfilling the mission here, and am connected with you, because well, we do not have to talk about that, because you know that yourself.
Of course, it is all peaceful and harmless, which it should remain, and neither the security of the earthly states nor the earth, its entire nature itself, nor its fauna and flora are in any way affected, but only our Pleiaren endeavor of our evolutionary and peaceful progress with regard to the Nakademian teachings, which you impart to us. Consequently, it is completely nonsensical that you should be associated with the foreigners and ridiculously suspected of dishonesty, monitored, and even spied upon, as you call it. And especially this state here, Switzerland, we have not the slightest interest in even being seen, let alone located. So spying, as you call it, is also ridiculous.
That is really ridiculous and idiotic, because efforts in this regard are nothing more than a shot in the oven. But obviously the intelligentum of certain persons and organizations is not sufficient to accept the truth, which is why spying will continue until I pass away, and you Plearan also stop coming here to Earth. Besides, the spies will also not be able to detect your presence until then, because even the most highly developed earthly technology is still so primitive that they cannot even locate you, as even the foreigners cannot do, although they are vastly superior to earthly technology. A disadvantage that unfortunately will not be pleasing to the Earthlings in the future, as I know, because the foreigners are.
Which you should not mention openly, though, because...
You are right, so then just in recalling and transcribing the conversation, dots are due once again. And what the so-called ufologists babble and fantasize about, as well as the military, we really do not care about that. But what can be said openly is that last Thursday evening, once again on our Hinterschmidruti-Gelände, probably near or behind the Ziloplatz, a shot startled various persons. So our house inhabitants as well as guests who were present and already suspected that I had been shot at again. But at that time, I was in the living room watching the news on TV. Mark and Michael immediately drove to Ziloplatz and through the forest to Sitzburg, but they could not see or find any human beings who had shot. A bit strange, because it was already dark, and besides, it is not hunting season at the moment, so that a hunter would have been there and shot. So everything remains a mystery, but perhaps it has to do with the fact, I do not know, that perhaps I am being shot at again, or that it is simply a warning against the Figu, or whether we are being targeted again, and again by the Turbinthal authorities, as happened in the 1970s when we moved into Hinterschmidruti and over all these years put everything back in order and rebuilt it. They were here with 8 persons, 2 of whom were policemen, and they objected to what we were doing, partly without asking the authorities, to put everything back in order. I do not know yet what is to come from the authorities and the canton in a dictatorial way, but it was said, which sounded like a threat from a young official, while the older community representatives and the policemen held back, that there was still a lot to be done. The fact that everything, that is to say the buildings, the land and the forest, where some things had simply been cleared, was completely dilapidated, and the authorities did nothing about it, but instead had a new cooking cooker and a washing machine put in the dilapidated kitchen for the poor people, was stupidly commented on with the comment that everything should simply have been demolished and rebuilt.
I do not understand that, because you have done the right thing very laboriously, so it is completely incomprehensible that now the authorities are interfering again and starting to harass you anew with new municipal officials and even with the police. I do not understand that. But what you said earlier elsewhere is probably correct. But, since I am going to be here for a few more months, I want to learn a few things about the planet Earth. I want to ask you to what extent you are instructed regarding your home planet.
Well, what can I say? Actually, I only have a certain general knowledge. Unfortunately, nothing more, so I cannot answer for everything. By that I mean that I am not an expert in planetary science, especially not a geologist, etc. I can explain some things to you. But it is certainly not what you want to know.
My questions will make you
probably embarrass me, which is why it is probably better if we talk about it purely in private, and I get you reference books on it that you can read and learn from at your leisure.
That is a good idea, though I am happy to claim to do so. However, I still want to ask what knowledge you can give me about the structure of the Earth in the outer layers. I am interested in that if you can tell me some things about it.
In that respect, I have only general knowledge, and so I do not know very much.
What I am particularly interested in are the plates of the Earth, as well as the structure of the layers of the Earth, as well as, if you have knowledge about that, something regarding the root system of plants.
But that is something else. Yes, I know something about that. But I would like to talk to you about that privately, without having to call up everything and write it down. At the moment, it seems much more important to me to retrieve and also write down what I wrote in the 1 to 94 O's with regard to thoughts.
That is what you are working on, as you have already told me. In the annals of Svath is recorded some of what you saw together in the depths of the seas and in the great forests there.
Yes, that was really interesting. But to talk about it openly, that is just not good. Because the know-it-alls, ignoramuses, doubters, and especially scientists and stubbornly living in negation idiots deny everything, call it fantasy or lies, and...
I know that, but for my part, it is fascinating to me what all Svath has put down in writing, and so I would like to hear from yourself what all you have seen and experienced.
I can explain that privately, yes, but not in such a way that it then also becomes public through the contact reports. Public. It is enough that my photos of Sim Yase's beamship are called fake by negators. Know-it-alls and other idiots, and also the contacts with you are called lies and fraud, although everything can be proven to be genuine with evidence and witnesses. So it would be if I were to tell what small creatures and giant beings we have seen in the depths of the seas, still completely unknown to earthlings, like the small and large animals, beasts, and other creatures in the primeval forests. This, as well as human beings in the primeval forests, who do not even know that there is anything other than forest outside their forest. But it was also submerged sites that we saw, as well as...
I do not think it would be correct to talk about that openly, so you are certainly right to tell me privately, which...
Yes, also Ta said not to tell me anything more about it.
That is to be understood, but I am interested in all that you have experienced together with Svath, which has nothing to do with you wanting to stand out with it, as you fear that in this wise everything might be misjudged by persons who envy you. Something that has to be considered effectively, but nevertheless I would be grateful to you if you would now openly explain something to me concerning the earth plates and earthquakes, etc. I am really interested in this personally. Besides, it is not like it is information that is the same as what was mentioned earlier.
Yes, that is right, so why it should be like that? But I really do not know too much. Also, I do not remember Svath's teachings very well, because my brain has become old, and the connection to the corresponding knowledge bank of creation energy is probably not the best anymore. But I will try to bring out a few things. So, officially there are 7 continents and, if I am correctly oriented, 195 countries in the world. Every country, every continent, and every region is individual and unique in terms of geography, vegetation, climate, history or ecosystems, nature, flora, and fauna, and therefore different. With Svath, I was in various caves inside the earth, for example in a limestone cave in Abkhazia, the depth of which was about 2,200 meters. I have also been with Svath to various caves in Russia, Germany, Switzerland, Africa, America, South America, Australia, and also in the Caribbean, which even earthlings can easily explore. However, this was only an example, because there were even deeper ones, which were not made of limestone, and in which there were also various small and also larger creatures, also those which shone in the permanent darkness, as well as crustaceans and also other water creatures, also bacteria, etc., which were to be found in the caves, in which there was constantly water, salty and even sweet at the same time, which was on top of each other but did not mix. Together with Svath, I also saw old ruins of cities that existed thousands of years ago, not only in the Brazilian jungle, but also in the oceans, such as Japan, America, and Israel, etc., as well as sunken islands, such as off Sicily and in the Indian Ocean. All things that the earthlings have not yet discovered to this day, and will be amazed one day when it will be the case that one or the other will be found. Svath explained to me many things about this, as well as that the earthlings will find some of these things on a small scale, but that they will never be able to penetrate into the depths of the interior of the earth, where we have been. On the contrary, however, he said, it would be with strenuous efforts and many sacrifices and deaths that all over the world the summits of the high mountains would be climbed, but we could enter them effortlessly. Here in Switzerland and everywhere in the world, when he beamed us out of his ship and we could enter the high mountain tops everywhere, from where I could look at the fantastic, beautiful earthly world. And this was possible for me with Svath, without ever having to climb the mountains laboriously. I actually only did that once in my life, on a school trip where we went up to Weisflujok Parsen in Bunderland. That was about 2660 meters above sea level and between Schonfig and the Landwasser Valley of Prättigau. But now I have something that seems kind of harebrained to me. I have often seen on TV that dangerous and really very lengthy mountain climbs are carried out in the Himalaya Mountains and all over the world, but I have never been enthusiastic about that. This is probably something for fanatics and those who want to show off to fellow human beings with their mountain climbs and still be admired for it. And as was recently said in the news, it is also used for fraud, namely that this and that person claims to have climbed mountains and reached the summit, although this does not correspond to the truth. For example, the great Reinhold Messner was officially denied that he had climbed 2 8,000-meter mountains to the summit. But I do not know what really corresponds to reality and truth because I was there not. I am also not concerned with the idiocy of record-breaking or with being in the foreground and wanting to be the best and be adored. Besides, Wikipedia has published the following, which I want to show you.
Comment by anyone.
The Guinness Book has stripped Reinhold Messner of his world records. He is not supposed to have been the first human being to have climbed all 14 8,000ers. In an interview, the mountaineering legend takes a stand. Instead, the American Edmund Viesturs is now considered the first person to climb all true 8,000-meter peaks, because the peaks have been recalculated. No wonder Messner is pissed off, not because he mourns his records, as he tells our newspaper, but because 99.9% of all those involved in this story have no idea about mountaineering and about summits. Nobody can imagine the dimensions up there.
Guinness Book rejects Reinhold Messner's world records.
The Guinness Publishing House recently updated its mountain records because a German mountain statistician and chronicler recalculated the positions of the 8,000-meter peaks. Eberhard Jurgalski from Lörrach has been analyzing digital geodata from the German Center for Aerospace and Summit Photos for years. He came to the conclusion that the summits of at least 3 of 14 8,000ers have been positioned incorrectly so far, and that their record climbers were not at the top at all. Reinhold Messner and Hans Kammerlander were not really on Annapurna in 1985, but had turned around 65 meters before the finish. Messner had therefore not been on all the highest mountains in the world. His 2 records as first on all 8,000ers and first on all 8,000ers without oxygen were invalid. And not only his, also those of Edurne Passaban as the first woman on all 8,000ers and of Gerlinde Kaltenbrunner, who climbed all 8,000ers without oxygen, are now marked as obsolete. Jurgalski's coordinate games sweep away entire mountain legends.
Messner emphasizes, of course we were at the summit.
Yet Messner is adamant that he and Kammerlander were at the top of Annapurna. Of course we were at the summit, he says. You cannot miss it when you come out of the northwest face. That is a relatively flat spot. We were able to look into the south face and saw the exit points of the tours that had climbed up to the summit before us via other routes. We were even able to radio briefly to base camp to say we were at the top. We also used binoculars to locate ourselves. There was no doubt.
Of course, I cannot judge what is written here. But the whole thing is obviously about what you mentioned earlier, which is that a human being wants to make himself appear great, to be special, to have achieved an extraordinary feat, and to be known, like this man who is mentioned here.
Exactly. That is how it is. Because behind everything, there is nothing other than a self-glorification and making oneself great, as is also the case with actors and sportsmen and women and many other greats of any kind. Consequently, something is hung on the big bell in order to make it known and therefore to be able to shine. This is done in such a way that all followers can hear and admire it, instead of them themselves achieving a good performance and feeling happy and satisfied about it. However, instead of a quiet achievement being made and the human being in question being happy and satisfied about it, this is completely absurd and absolutely inconceivable for the majority of human beings. This is proven by the fact that in many sports there is always a huge influx of inactive, fanatical and howling admirers from the spectators, but none of them is able to achieve a true performance by which they could be happy and satisfied, without being admired and praised by their followers and worshipped like gods. But now back to what you actually want to know, and what Svath and I experienced. I remember that he said that earthquakes actually only occur at depths of up to about 750 or 800 kilometers. Furthermore, earth tremors, always assuming that I remember Svath's explanations correctly, would usually be normal earthquakes at depths of up to about 75 kilometers, and he called these shallow earthquakes or something like that. Those that occur at depths of about 75 to 320 kilometers were called medium-deep earthquakes, after which he called them deep earthquakes from a depth of about 320 kilometers. Earthquakes, however, do not occur evenly on Earth, because the geographical distribution of earthquake areas is such that more occur in certain areas than elsewhere, which is also connected with the planetary self-rotation, as well as with the respective different composition of the continental plates. In particular, the strength, that is to say the hardness of the material of the continental plates that push over each other with great violence, although there are also smaller plates, as Svath said, plays an important role, as well as their formation. The shaking during strong quakes can have quite catastrophic consequences, depending on the fracture process of the earth plates colliding and rubbing against each other. If we look at the dependence of the type and size of the fracture process, that is to say the friction between the Earth's plates when they push against each other, by which I mean the processes of earth plate displacements, then I find the process quite interesting. Earthquakes are actually caused by fractures and shifts in the Earth, that is to say in its subsoil, which then cause the tremors. This process can last from a few seconds to several minutes, so the earthquake tremors can be shorter or longer, as can the intervals between one earthquake and the next. Earthquakes can even be felt in the sea, or so-called seaquakes, as I have also experienced several on ships, when they came roaring up through the ship from deep below and caused tremors. As far as I know, the actual Earth's crust, mantle, or crust is the layer of the Earth that lies directly beneath the surface. The Earth's crust is the outer solid layer of the Earth, but it extends down to a depth of about 30 kilometers, but up to 70 kilometers depending on the case. This is actually normally the separating layer between the Earth's crust, which is about 20 kilometers or 30 kilometers to 70 kilometers deep, and the Earth's mantle, after which the so-called mantle begins. Below this is the solid to viscoplastic mantle down to a depth of about 3,000 kilometers, followed by the liquid core. The Earth itself rotates, but its stability is somewhat disturbed by the overexploitation of the planet by the Earthlings. The Earth is actually made up of 14 main Earth plates, as Svath said, so 1. The North American Plate. 2. The South American Plate. 3. The Pacific Plate. 4. The Nazca Plate. 5. The Eurasian Plate. 6. The African Plate. 7. The Indo-Australian Plate. 8. The Philippine Plate. 9. The Cocos Plate 10. The Antarctic Plate 11. The Caribbean Plate 12. The Iranian Plate 13. The Arabian Plate 14. The Arctic Plate. There are also various smaller ones, but they are not of great importance. It is still to be explained that the Earth's crust, that is to say the uppermost mantle, is called lithosphere, because this consists of several large and many small fragments, which are actually called continental plates or lithospheric plates or tectonic plates. The Earth's core consists of the metals iron and nickel, which look like an icicle structure, as I could see together with Svath, whereas the Earth's core itself consists of an outer core more than 2,000 kilometers thick. Due to their conditions, the Earth's layers have different states of aggregation, solid and liquid, depending on their position. But the Earth also stores enormous quantities of water, especially in the mantle, which are bound up in rocks such as ringwoodite or brucite. According to Sfath, these are such huge quantities of water as all the oceans on the Earth's surface have together, although it should also be said that the oceanic crust is only about 8 to 22 kilometers thick. It is also to be said that the upper mantle of the Earth is actually made up of rock, which consists mainly of minerals called olivine and pyroxene or peridotite or something like that, these substances consisting of the elements magnesium, oxygen, and silicon, then also sulfur and other light elements. Under the rock layer of the Earth's crust, precisely in the Earth's mantle, there are already high temperatures, which Sfath measured of over 1,000 degrees Celsius, whereby there was also a very high pressure, which together causes the rock to melt and become viscous, namely magma, which expands and pushes upwards. Warm matter, Sfath further explained, has a lower density than colder matter, consequently it rises and moves upwards. Therefore, he explained, this is also the cause of the movement in the Earth's mantle, that is, the area from below the Earth's crust, which continues to the Earth's core. The Earth was formed much earlier than science claims, which puts it at about 4.54 billion years ago, further claiming that it took about 150 million years or so for the liquid rock on the surface to solidify and form the Earth's first crust. Sfath, however, said that the Earth as a real planet had already been formed from 7.5 billion years ago. That is broadly what I have learnt and what I can deduct.
And there you are saying that you...
Yeah, that is really not that much, and besides...
It is more than I expected. How did you once say? You are hiding your knowledge under a bushel.
With my knowledge in this regard, I really cannot brag much. So do not do that, because it is really not appropriate. You would better explain to me.
But you can tell me now.
Better tomorrow, because I want to get some more sleep if you...
All right, go ahead. For my part, I will lie down here on the cot for a bit.
Okay, then sleep well, and I will see you in the morning.
Yeah, see you in the morning. Get some more sleep, too.
I will.